Hi, I'm Reea, and today I'm talking with the very beautiful and very talented Rebecca Gibson. Rebecca is a psychic medium and channeler, and she has a really interesting history, having worked in the forensic and psychiatric field in some of the worst prisons in Australia with serial killers. Rebecca is also an expert on narcissism and empaths, so I hope you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Here's Rebecca. So, hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Rhea. Thanks so much for having me.
That's okay. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm really excited about this conversation we're about to have. I guess I want to start off today talking about channeling because I'm a channeler and you're a channeler. And one of the points we want to get across is that there's all different sorts of channeling, of
Yeah.
course, artists channel, musicians channel, writers channel. So what we're doing isn't so woo-woo and out there. In fact, we could say that the prophets who wrote the Bible channeled
Channeled.
it, right? And Muhammad apparently channeled, the Quran and all that sort of stuff. So channeling has been something that's been around for a long, long time. We just haven't used that word to describe it. But I want to get into talking about your experience of it today. So tell us how you came to channeling.
I first started writing, automatic writing was my first way of channeling first. And so I'd been doing that since I was a child. I can remember probably 1992. I started channeling a lot about world events, and I think there was a lot of us around that time that started opening up to a lot
Mm-hmm.
more of what was to come. And then throughout my career, because my career's been in psychiatry, I shut down my abilities because the two did not mix during the 90s or the 2000s or even the last decade. It's a struggle to come from two different worlds like that. So I shut
Sure.
it down, and then an incident happened in 2016 where I started channeling again after something happened to me. And
So was that like a dark night of the soul thing?
oh no, I've had plenty of them. No, this was no, this was really different. So I'd come out of my long dark night of the soul, and I had an 18-month-old. And I know you're familiar with Newcastle. I was coming out of the farmers markets where they have them at the stadium, and it was on a
Yep.
Wednesday afternoon. And as I'm driving up to the T intersection, I was going to turn right, and yeah, that's right. Okay, like left, right. I was going to turn right, and the light was green for ages, and I've just come into the intersection, and as I'm into, because it's like three lanes at each
Yes.
way
Yep.
there, I stopped on this side of the intersection. The car stopped, and like it just stopped, and there was this bright light that it was the brightest light ever. I got really weird. Everything went really slow motion, and a car was speeding from the left and went through the red light, maybe 30 to 40 kilometers over the speed limit, like really fast. If I'd gone out into the intersection, it would have killed my daughter because she was on that side of the car. And to me, it kind of looked like the car went through the front of my car. It was strange. So
Mm-hmm.
I went home, I was very spacey, said to my very left brain grounded husband, this really weird thing happened. He's like, oh, here we go again. She's being dramatic.
Woo
Gets
woo.
on the dash cam. And he's like, what's that light? I'm like, I don't know. And he goes, what happened? I said, I'm telling you, I don't know. Something really weird happened. So the very next day, at exactly the same time, he drives us back out to the intersection and he's trying to measure out if it was the sun hitting the revision mirror. And I'm like, how's that possible? Because the dash cam's sitting in front of the revision mirror. And he couldn't figure it out. He went really, like, he got really weird about it. But me being back in that spot 24 hours later affected me again. We went home and I had this out of body experience, and I just picked up a pen and paper, and then every single day for about 3 or 4 hours a day for months I just like
Right.
wrote automatic channel, and then the voice channeling kicked in.
So what were you actually writing, Rebecca? What was coming out when you were writing?
Stuff about Trump and his terms, and stuff like a lot of military stuff, and changing of alliances, and all of this stuff that's going on right now with the pandemic, and stuff to do with martial law in the States, and things to do with China and natural disaster events, and then a lot of the other side saying to me, you need to tell everybody who you are and what you do, and you need to start working doing this because I mean, there was like you have to get out of psychiatry and you have to start this business. I'm like, that's
Because
not happening.
you were actually doing forensic psychiatry and working in jails and doing all sorts of weird stuff, weren't
Yeah,
you?
and at the time I was working in emergency psychiatry, so I was, yeah, that's not happening. And then they just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed until I said yes. You know, you get nagged. You just nagged
Yeah,
and nagged and nagged.
I do know.
Yeah, so
So
the
that
nagging
stuff you
stopped.
channeled was stuff that you couldn't possibly have known. It sounds like it was way out of the realm of your, knowledge base, and it was all precognitive.
Well, yeah. Um, there was a lot of quantum physics stuff too that I had zero idea what was coming out. All
Yeah.
this stuff about sacred geometry and stuff about Fibonacci and golden ratio, and I'm like, what is? I don't understand any of this. And so then I went on a little hunting expedition of like, what does any of this mean? And then I came across a woman called Dr. Teresa Bullard, who's a quantum physicist, who has such a beautiful way in how she articulates the quantum field in terms of consciousness and spirituality and our abilities as spiritual beings having human experiences and the science behind how we can channel, how we can connect into the quantum field of consciousness. And it was eye-opening because I've come from such a left brain, evidence-based career. I
Science.
needed I
Yeah.
needed to know that there was science in it, and obviously scientists channel stuff and then try and prove what they're channeling. So we're all doing it.
Inspiration, innovation, anybody who's an inventor, we all know that, that's channeled.
Yeah, yeah. So there you go. So here I am now with this business, and
So you stopped, you said when that message first came through and they started bugging you that you weren't going to leave your day job, but eventually, obviously, you did. So tell us about
the
that.
only thing that forced me out was I'm still technically employed at the hospital. I just haven't been there since June 24 last year. I wasn't listening again, and I was working all night shifts to try and run my business, parent during the day, and then working like nights and hardly getting any sleep. This is where the voice channeling started kicking in. The more tired I got, the less my ego was trying to control everything, and so
Yeah.
soul had more access to me, and I started voice channeling after night shifts and stuff. And then that freaked me out. I caught a couple of times. I'd wake up and I'd have all these notifications on Facebook. I'm like, what's this about? And whilst I was really tired, I was channeling Isis and Beset and Hathor, and they basically were taking over my phone, and I was going live on Facebook voice channeling and had no idea. And so I had a freak out. And then I'm like, oh, if I'm doing this and I don't know it, what if I'm at work and I'm tired at work and then I start channeling
Channeling it.
in the middle
Yeah.
of a psychiatric
They'd lock you
hospital?
up. They definitely lock you up.
So
They reckon
I
that most of the people in psychiatric hospitals are just a lot more spiritual and tuned in than everybody else, and
Yeah.
that's why they're locked up there.
So I thought, that's not a good idea. And so I tried to stop it, and then the nagging started again and about leaving, and I wouldn't. Scarcity. Plus, I've worked so hard for my career, and how am I going to replace like my six-figure income with working in a spiritual based business? And then I came home after 3 night shifts, and I was so tired, and my husband was having a crack about I was working too much. And then I asked him how, like, I'd cooked him his favorite meal the night before I'd gone to work. I came home and I was already grumpy and agitated. And then I said to him, how was dinner? And he said to me, it wasn't one of your best. And that was the end. Like, dragon came out. Like, what? I'm like, you need to help more. I can't do all this by myself. I need a break. Get out. He's like, what? I said, get out so I can come down. He goes, no, so stubborn, you leave. So I walked out and my foot spontaneously broke. Like literally 5 minutes after I said I need a break, my foot broke. And my guides are like, if you're not going to sit down and do this, we'll sit you down. And so lots of
That's a pretty
complications.
drastic way of making you sit down and channel.
I've got a foot full of metal now, and I haven't been back to work since.
Oh, so I think that's really interesting. You were channeling Isis because, I channeled the Egyptian goddess Mart, and Mart was actually, pretty much old kingdom, really old kingdom Egypt. But as the Egyptian empire went forward, she actually became Isis. So it's the same goddess, well, that's been in lots of different cultures. So she's been called various things, I found out, that same goddess. And she was Ninmar and Ninsurhag and Mami in the old Anunnaki lineage. She was Reea in Greece, which is pretty extraordinary. So yeah, so it's the same entity. Isn't that
Yeah.
interesting? Beautiful.
Yeah, she came through a lot of stuff around healing, physical healing, sexual energy being used for healing, the goddesses
Yes.
showing the priestesses how to use
Yes.
fellatio to help heal. It was
Yep.
fascinating stuff.
Does sound fascinating.
Yeah, my husband was happy about that.
Yeah, I bet. But of course, they did use sexual healing in the Egyptian
Yeah,
temples, the
yeah,
priestesses. I
yeah,
got told that I was in the temples using sexual energy in a healing modality, as a healing modality, long before I started channeling myself. I was told that that was one of my other incarnations. I was a bit freaked out at the time.
yeah. No, it was fascinating.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
then yeah, and
So
then
you started doing readings, working one-on-one with people, then doing readings
yes,
using your channeling.
yes. Well, I was trying not to channel because I was still in that dichotomy of psychiatry and then the light language started.
Yeah. So tell us about
And
that.
so the light languages started. I'm a singer, so I noticed the more in Zen I got with my singing, the more relaxed light language started to come out. And I didn't realize I was doing it. And I came home from a night shift one day, and I'd been speaking light language the whole ride home. And I thought my husband and my daughter were still in bed, and I'm in the kitchen just, "Whoa." And I turn around, and my husband's standing there going, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" He goes, "What is coming out of your mouth?" And I'm like, "Oh, can you hear that?" Because I thought it was in my head. I didn't, because I
Yeah.
have like earphones on and I'm listening to
Mm.
binaural beats for something. And so then I started talking it all the time. In my head, I was answering my daughter in English, but light language was coming out. And then she started to understand some of the stuff as what I was saying. And then I started researching it and then found a whole range of people on YouTube. And I'm like, oh, this is the thing. I'm not losing my mind. I'm not talking
Yes.
in tongues. I'm not
Yes.
psychotic.
Yeah.
And then
It's
I could
become quite
understand
the
the
thing.
yeah, I could understand the different dialects. And so I'm lucky enough now to have made connections with one particular woman in America where she and I speak light language to each other with hardly any English at all. And it's a very bilingual conversation where English words will be mixed in with light language, but we understand each other more in light language than we do when we're speaking English. And it's fascinating because it's like coming home. It it's just I feel like I'm home when I'm speaking it.
So, for anyone that's not heard of light language before, can you give us a sort of definition?
So light language is basically universal sound for us all to understand one another at a soul level because everything's frequency. Frequency is sound waves, so everything depending on the depth and the speed of the sound waves depends on like the pitch and stuff. But we all understand frequency. So if we were to speak to a human from another country with a different language, you wouldn't be able to understand the words, but you'd still understand like the feeling behind what they're saying because there's so much that's communicated in that frequency other than just the words that you're listening to. So
Well,
the
don't they
language,
say that something like 90% of communication is non-verbal anyway?
yeah. So light language is just, I mean, people can understand like there's a resonance, there's a feeling that people get. Their egos obviously not going to understand a word that's coming out of my mouth, but their soul very much understands it. And their physical response, like a lot of people get goosebumps, a lot of people will feel it in their heart, a lot of people will feel a release. People will start crying. People will feel, oh my goodness, where was that? I feel like I'm home. I feel like I belong. I know that. I'm not sure where I know that from. And it's because it's how our souls communicate with each other via frequency. So light language, and then different dialects depending on what star system it's coming from now, with all these star seeds now coming to Earth. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah. It's beautiful.
now I suggest everyone get on YouTube and just put in light language and then just see what comes up, and then just
Yes.
watch people and
Yes.
listen to people. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. So when you do your readings, how are you doing them now? Because, well, we were talking about this a little bit off air. So there's a whole bunch of words, different words that are used in our field. And I don't know about you, but I find myself jumping from the use of one word to the other because a lot of them have sort of common definitions out there in the public. So, for instance, the word medium, I avoid that word like the plague because to me, a medium is someone who channels dead relatives, and I don't like doing that.
Yeah, but a medium's still a channel. It's
But a
just that,
medium is still a
yeah.
channel, yes,
So
of course.
medium, obviously, people are attached talking to dead people with medium. I mean, you have shows like Medium with Alison Dubois and
Yes,
stuff like that. But medium is just the conduit to channel.
yes,
You're the medium.
yes, 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 yes. I like the word, it's just the association
Yeah.
because there seems to be this fascination with talking to dead relatives out there and get all that John Edwards and those stage shows. I can't even watch them. I find them cringeworthy. I just like, oh my God. So I don't like that word. I don't really like the word psychic either, but I can't get away from using it because again, it's another well-known word. And when we live in the land of Google and keywords and all that sort of stuff, you've almost got to use some of these words, even though I don't sort of really identify with them. You've got to use them so people can find you.
Yeah.
So you use the word psychic and medium in
Yeah.
when you're describing what you do to people. So if someone was going to come to you for a reading, how does a normal reading usually go with you?
I have different ways of doing it, but my preferred method is I'll book someone in for a like Zoom, face-to-face reading, but I'll get them to send all their questions to me 30 minutes beforehand, and then I'll go into channel. I find my readings cleaner if I don't have the person in front of me and I don't know anything about them and I'm not reading off cues from them.
Yeah.
And so then I channel, like right channel all the answers to their questions and then go over it face to face with them in person. I just find it cleaner that way. Sometimes I'll do 3 question readings where I don't actually meet the person at all and I'll just answer their questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I find those are cleaner too because my ego can't get involved because I don't know anything about the person.
Right.
Uh, Otherwise, ego will sit there and, like, especially my psychiatric trained ego will sit
Yeah.
there and try and read like affect, like facial expressions and body language, and I don't want to do that. So
Mm, mm,
I find it, for me, it's easier that my psychiatric brain doesn't get involved if I channel first before meeting them.
yeah. Okay, that's good.
It's different for
And
everyone.
so and so you don't do any voice channeling in your sessions, do you
I do
do
light language
light
if it
language?
comes, yeah, if it comes through for people. I light language, but I don't need to voice channel other goddesses and stuff now because I know that they're talking to me. They don't need to speak through me. So I can just, once you understand that, like, you're a sovereign being and that you're part of source energy or God or whatever word what people want to put to that thing that is all of us in essence, then I moved past that need to separate what's coming through, that it's coming from another person,
Mm.
if that makes sense, because it's
Yes,
all
yeah,
coming
no,
from
it
God.
totally makes sense. So when I first started channeling Mart, I can feel her energy coming into the right side of my body. So I knew that she was there. And then I realized that I could call it in at any time. And then I realized that she was there all the time. And all I had to do was tune into it. And then I was told, well, hello, she's been with you the whole of your
Yeah,
life, just waiting so that you could connect with her because really what they're doing is they're just sort of impressing their thoughts into
yeah.
our mind and then we're speaking their thoughts. That's sort of how it happens. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
but when
totally
you
get it.
dig further back, their thoughts are coming from source. All of it's coming from the same source of
Yes.
energy. So I think when we put labels or names or associations to it, it makes it easier for us to, because we're so conditioned to everything separate, we're separate beings, but we're not. It's
Mhm.
easier for our ego to wrap our heads around the information that's coming because
Yes.
we can attach it to a person rather than the vast expanse of it's coming from everywhere.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. How do you feel about the fortune teller thing, predicting the future?
I do it, but free will always change everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes when a collective energy is coming, it will shift things. So, for example, last year, where are we? We're 2020 still. She's like, oh. In 2019, I had told particular clients at the beginning of the year that they would be traveling across the states. Then, when they had another session with me, probably around August last year, I said, no, that's cancelled. Don't go near the States for years. You won't be going over there until 2022, 2023. And they're like, oh, this, how can you change your mind? And I didn't want to say it because there's a pandemic coming and no one's going to want to go near America for a while. Just like steer clear as long as you can. Like, I don't like to put fear into people. I just
Yes.
like, just you'll see, just wait and watch it unfold. So, like, we always are predicting things like that, but it's not set in concrete. I think people get so anxious about, oh, Rebecca said this is going to happen and I don't want it to happen, and they get so triggered. And it's like, well, if you don't want it to happen, you've got free will, but it's a possibility should you choose to manifest that. It's easier for you to manifest it, but if you don't want it, don't accept it. You get to create your life. I'm not creating a life for you.
Yeah,
You're the
I come in
creator of
from
your life.
exactly the same position. See, I've spoken to about 30 channelers across the world when I was doing my training. So, I was talking to, Sheila Gillette, who is one of the channelers that told Esther Hicks she was going to start channeling Abraham. Like I've spoken to, tracked down and found the best channelers I could find and had sessions with them. None of them will predict the future. They just won't do it because they say we've got free will, and every thought you changes the probability or the potential of the future.
That's
And
right.
I say to people, well, if I actually give a prediction because they've asked me for one, I don't give them without them asking, but some people are insistent.
Mm.
They're desperate to know the future for some
Mm-hmm.
reason because they're terrified or they're upset or they just need to be um, you know given some faith and some hope. But if you predict the future and it's not a future that they don't want, well, that's a great thing because they get to change it then.
Yeah,
So I sort of come at it from the perspective of teaching them how they create their own
yeah,
reality. And if you don't want that reality, here's how to avoid it. Here's what you've got to
exactly.
do to avoid that reality.
Exactly. Yeah, just because I said it doesn't mean that it has to happen.
No, no, that's
But it's a
exactly it.
possibility. If, like, I like to light up good things for people. When people ask me, is anything bad going to happen? Well, why would I tell you that? Because I could then put it into your head that this thing's going to happen, and then you'll be so, oh my God, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and then it goes and happens. Like,
Mm,
I don't want to give anybody anything fear based. Everything I want for their highest good, or to come from a place of pure love, to come from source, I want to make my clients' lives easier, more graceful, and save them time and money.
yes, yes, yes. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So, yeah, I get a lot of clients who are frightened and they're very nervous because they think I'm going to tell them something bad. And I never do.
No,
I never do that. I mean, I don't see what would be the point in doing that,
there is no point.
And so I think it comes from that kind of the evolution of psychic readings. I like to think of it as, in the olden days when we had kind of the gypsy fortune teller, psychic. We're not in that same energy anymore. I mean, Earth's even shifted from third density to fourth density. And
Yeah,
so we're not in the same energy anymore. So the information that's coming through now is of a much higher quality. So it's
yeah,
always about empowering and giving people hope and faith and, connecting to their inner goddess and realizing that they can connect themselves to their own higher self. It's all
yeah.
always about that.
Getting people to understand that they're creators of their life and that you're one with everything, and that there is no separation. This is really hard for people to wrap their head around. And I can remember when I was still in that space years ago, where I'm like, what do you mean everything's one? What do you mean there's no such thing as time? This doesn't make any sense. This is like crap.
Yeah.
But now I understand it. I embody
Yes.
it. I look
Yes.
back, especially working with prisoners and stuff. People are like, how could you do that without judgment? Because I very clearly understood then, there, but for the grace of God, go I.
Mm.
Any one of us could end up in jail at any time should
Yeah.
something occur. You just don't know. You can't put yourself above other people just because they're in a bad spot. But even when I would be talking to serial killers, I'd still sit there, and as an empath, I'd still know if this is in them and I'm sitting with them, this same energy is also in me. I still have the ability, I would never do it, but I still have the capability of going around and killing a whole bunch of people. I wouldn't do it. You can't separate yourself from anyone, because the minute you start doing that, you're not in a you're not in a higher frequency where you understand that you create your life. You think that life's happening to you.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's a really interesting thing. Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychologist who's very prominent across the world, says, and I like this, he says that, we all have that darkness or shadow
All of
inside
us
us.
do.
And unless
Absolutely.
you acknowledge your inner monster and tame your inner monster and then choose to act, out of a higher frequency or a space of grace, then you're deluding yourself and you're never going to be
Exactly.
the authentic person that you are. We all have
Exactly.
an inner monster.
Which is our ego.
Mm.
And people are like, oh, ego's a bad thing. I was like, no, ego is part of your humanity. It's your consciousness. Your body's your subconsciousness and your soul's your higher consciousness. And your ego is designed to keep you safe, and sometimes it'll
Mm.
freak out.
Mm.
And that's where free will comes from, and that's part of humanity. And people who say that they transcend their ego are full of shit. You can't
Yes,
transcend your ego if you're human.
absolutely.
So
I
any of the
totally
spiritual
agree.
gurus going, I've transcended my ego, that's their ego saying that.
Yeah,
Like
that's
their
right.
ego's got full control over what's happening
Yes,
with that person.
yes.
We all have ego, and ego comes with fear, and that's where fear comes from. Like we don't have fear when we're not in human existence, because we don't have ego when we're not in human existence. And so it's the whole point of us being here and having this human experience is to learn about our ego, learn about fear, and how to move out of that into love, how to move out of that into soul communication, how to alchemize all of the shadow stuff that comes with that and acknowledge it and tame it
Mm. Mm.
with
There
love.
are spiritual practices that you can do that I teach my clients about how to differentiate between your ego mind and your higher, wiser mind.
Yes,
And that's something that can be practiced over time. And
exercise.
everybody knows the difference between the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other.
Yeah, exactly. There's
Yeah.
just people are just waking up more and more to this, and people are understanding more about ego now instead of thinking that ego is a bad thing. Because ego would always be attached to people saying, "Oh, they're so egotistical, they're narcissistic, they're difficult, they're this." And when you have a look, because I mean, I've seen so many people, especially in like really harsh malignant narcissism, it's fear. Fear acting and talking constantly,
Yes.
and them not having access to love frequencies,
Yeah.
completely disconnected from self love.
Yeah.
And and people think, oh, people who are egotistical love themselves, and they don't love themselves at all, because
No.
ego doesn't feel love like that.
No, no, that's right. That's right. So that's one of your areas of specialty, narcissism, and one of mine. We both got brought up in narcissistic training camp, as we were discussing earlier. But, inside every narcissist is a frightened child.
Absolutely, it's a total disconnect from love frequencies.
Yeah.
and and in order for them to feel love or feel self-worth or feel validated, they have to seek it from an outside source. And because they don't know how to do it for themselves, they have to manipulate people around them into thinking that they're better than what they believe they are. And so that's where all the gaslighting comes from, and look at me, I'm so wonderful, I'm so great. And meanwhile, they hate themselves. They're so
Yes.
disconnected. They don't feel like they belong anywhere. They don't feel connected to love or people. A lot of them will feel connected to animals, and this is where people start getting, well, they don't love me. Why are they so horrible? But they treat their dog or cat like it's the
Yes.
king or queen of the universe. And it's because animals love unconditionally. They give you
Yes.
love without wanting anything back. And so that frequency a narcissist can hook into really quickly and easily, but they still can't do that with people.
Yes.
This is why
Yeah.
empaths have so many narcissists in their life, because one, most empaths will have a narcissistic parent, and it's to train you to like emotionally connect into someone at a distance. I can remember my mum would be coming home from work and I'd be already like, anxious, anxious, anxious. The minute I knew she'd left, I'd be feeling in what kind of mood is she in and how should I be when she gets home? Do
Yes.
I stay in my room? Do I make sure everything's clean? Do I
Yes.
have a drink waiting for her? What the fuck do I do to
Yeah.
avoid conflict and to not
Yeah.
have to walk on eggshells when she gets home?
Yeah.
And so I would read her mood and where her frequency would be.
Yes.
So you're trained that way. What happens though is we then,
Become hyper vigilant.
yeah, and then we're also programmed that we have no self-worth,
Yeah.
and we go the opposite. I call it narcissism in shadow. I say true narcissism is loving self, understanding that self is source, and like that's proper love of self, and that you drop into shadow, and then you've got the traditional form of narcissistic personality when they're in their shadow, they feel disconnected, and so they gaslight and manipulate, and um, when when their nastiness is mirrored back to them, that's when the rage kicks in, and then that's when
Yes.
they get really nasty and manipulative. But all it is just like a wild animal just trying to control the situation out of
Yeah.
fear of being hurt, and so
Yeah.
they lash out first. And then we have the empaths that drop off into narcissistic shadow, where we're feeling disconnected from self and we don't feel self love or self worth. And so we don't set boundaries. We let people walk all over us. We avoid conflict. We're not assertive about how we feel. We'll lie to make the other person feel good. And we'll do
Hmm.
anything to not walk on eggshells. Both of us are completely disconnected. Both of us are being manipulative. Empaths, when they do that, when they don't set boundaries and they don't speak up about how they're feeling, when it comes to a conflict, they're actually manipulating that energy. That truth can't be fixed and solved right then and there, and so they walk away feeling like they've diffused the situation. Empaths, when they're like that, feel a little bit superior and high and mighty against a narcissist, like,
Yeah.
well, I'm so kind and you're so fucking horrible, and you're still
Yeah.
separating yourself.
Yeah.
But they go away feeling resent, and they'll pass that resentment over to the other person rather than taking ownership and accountability that you're feeling resentment because you just didn't speak up.
Mm.
You're going to go off and fume over it, and then play out the conversation in your head that the other person's the one in the wrong and you're not because you're sensitive and they're not sensitive. It's still no responsibility. It's still no accountability.
But what about if you can't speak up because you're not safe? That, I mean, I've been
But
physically
that's
abused
Yeah,
and
so that's
all
a
sorts of
whole
things.
different kettle of fish. If there's physical violence and stuff going on, then that's when people do need to like have some self responsibility to get help and reach out and make sure, because I've been in a violent relationship and I knew like I had to go through that to get past the why doesn't she just leave. I had to be in that vulnerable position of I was totally disconnected from self love, and I thought, well, this is what I deserve. And then there was part of me that's like, I hate myself. Maybe if he kills me, I won't have to kill myself because I didn't want to kill myself. Do you know what I mean?
God.
All of that
Yeah.
thought starts to go on in your head,
Terrible.
and you allow yourself to be controlled, but you are allowing yourself to be controlled. I had to get myself to the stage, okay, enough's enough. I need to seek help. I need to do something. No one else was going to come in and rescue me, because most of the time when you're in a situation like that, you're not telling anyone. You're actually so in shame, in guilt,
Yeah.
that you'll put on this perfect picture for everybody around you, and nobody has a clue what's going on behind closed doors. And so
Yeah.
you can't sit in that victim energy and expect someone to come in and save you when nobody knows what's really going on, because you're still doing this whole thing of diffusing the situation and presenting to people that
People
picture
pleasing.
perfect. Yeah, and people pleasing.
Mm.
So we
Mm.
all have to be self responsible and accountable for our own safety, and that includes people who are right now in violent relationships. They have to find a way to reach out and get help, because there is help.
Yes, yes. I think that word empath, has some difficult definitions on the planet right now too. I see a lot of people doing what I'd call a spiritual bypass. You know, if I just love the narcissist more, if I'm just more loving, if I'm just more accepting, if I, you know, all that sort of stuff. And I know that that's crap and it doesn't work because I did all that and I've been there and I came out the other side of it. So what do you
Right.
say about that? And the other thing that I hear empaths saying is, oh, you know, I'm more sensitive than everybody else. I can't go here. I can't go there. I can't do this. I can't do that because I'm an empath. And I say to that, bullshit.
It is bullshit. And this is how we've been propaganda to. Book after book after book after book that comes out talking about psychic vampires and poor empaths being drained by all these psychic vampires.
Yes,
It's such a crock of shit.
as if we're victims.
Empaths should, and I'm writing a course for this to empower empaths. We are some of the most powerful because empaths are psychic ability. It's like actually feeling the emotional frequency of everybody around you as if it's your own. It's not, it's because there's sympathy which is attached to ego, is like, oh, I would not want that to happen to me, poor you. Or there's empathy, is like, oh my God, if I was in your shoes, I'd probably feel like this. Or there's the empath that I can physically feel what you're feeling right now. I can
Yeah,
feel the pain, I can feel the emotion, I
yeah.
can feel why, I can feel the fear, the tears, I can feel everything
But
as if
I
it's
just see
mine.
that as the empath being able to draw in more data from the matrix. We're
Yes.
just tuning into more information than
So
everybody else.
what we're doing is we're hooking chords into everybody around us and recalibrating their emotional frequency. And that's why we do have so many narcissists in our lives, because they're not able to hook into love frequency themselves. So we've contracted that we'll give it to them so they can learn how to do it themselves. And so when they talk about cord cutting and stuff and like, oh, I've cut cords and still I'm having a problem. Yeah, but you haven't pulled your own cords back in. You've got
Yeah,
to be accountable for what energy you're passing on to them.
yes,
You're the one that keeps hooking into them. It's not the other way around. And if
yeah,
you feel drained around them, then pull your cords back in. Send
yeah.
them love and then pull your cords back in.
Mm.
Have boundaries. Be assertive. Speak up exactly how you feel. Stop people pleasing. Stop rescuing people. That is such an egoic thing to do,
Oh,
to run
yes.
around rescuing people. I've been there, done that. And it
Yeah,
just made me sick. And I'm like, and it's such a savior complex, which comes from our victim archetype.
yes, yes.
And so once we're more accountable for ourselves and our energy and what we're doing, it's way more empowering. There are no psychic vampires running around draining us. We have to be completely responsible and accountable for us, what we're
Mm,
doing, how we're
mm,
showing up, and
mm.
how we're creating our life. And I'm on my third marriage. All my husbands have had a form of narcissism. I've always mirrored it back in my own narcissistic way of people pleasing, walking on eggshells, not being assertive, blah, blah, blah. Once I realized what I was doing in this marriage and how we were just mirroring back to each other that we weren't connected, instead of me giving him more love, which just made him think that he wasn't doing anything wrong, because that's what happens. They don't think they're
Mm,
doing anything wrong.
mm.
We're not setting boundaries or speaking up. So the next minute after we've exploded at 6 weeks of resentment, they're either like, have you got your period? What's wrong? Like, where did this come from? I don't understand. And we're like, you're
I'm
such a
laughing because I've been there.
it's so true, isn't it? And we're like, you're such a narcissistic asshole. How could you not read my mind and see how I'm feeling? It's not like I haven't shut my mouth and glared at you and slammed a couple of doors. We
Yeah.
get really passive aggressive. They don't
Mm,
get it. And
that's
so
true.
I
You've got to
stopped.
be obvious with men.
I stopped and I just started loving myself and I started setting boundaries from a place of self-love because that's where they come from. I started speaking up about how I feel. It was really hard at first because I was changing the rules of the relationship. We'd gone years of it being one way, now all of a sudden he's and they take it personally. He's like, oh, she's going to leave. She doesn't love me anymore. Why is she
Mm,
doing this? And I would have to very clearly state, I'm setting boundaries because I love myself enough now that I don't like what's happening. I'm speaking up now about how I truly feel, and I've always felt this way. And I'm really sorry that I've manipulated you into thinking that I was fine when I really
yeah,
wasn't, and
yeah,
that's bad on me.
yeah.
And he's like, oh, because I took responsibility for my shit instead of
Mm,
putting it onto him. I can't speak to you because you yell at me, or you like intimidate me, or you talk over the top of me, or you won't let me finish a sentence. Like now, when he does it, we've got to this stage where I'm like, you're speaking over the top of me, and I'm not here for that. Until you're willing to engage in a proper conversation, I'm going to go away until you're ready to listen. And he's like, oh, okay. And it just changes the whole
But
same.
don't you think that in order to have that conversation, the other person needs to be somewhat emotionally healthy and open to listening? You can't actually have those conversations with personality disordered narcissists.
See, I think you can because I'm doing it with my mum now. The more I'm showing up in my self-love,
Mm-hmm.
the less I'm affected by the triggers that like I'm not triggered anymore. There is no reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And especially because mums, when they're narcissistic, tend to get very personal and very nasty and emotionally abusive in what they say, not the physical side of things, and not listening and all the gaslighting. And I'd sit there and I was like, I'm not taking this on board. This is your stuff. I'm
Mm.
not, like, it's kind of like you have to whack on your armor and like go into battle, and
The
you've got to,
goddess warrior.
yeah, you can't cave to wanting the conflict to go.
Yeah.
But if it's physical conflict, then you need to get out and seek help. Like it's different. If you're physically going to be harmed, you need to like remove yourself from the relationship. And that's
Mm.
an accountability thing too. I've got to leave. And there are plenty of places now to help women get back on their feet, help women start getting income, keep women safe, keep women
Especially in
secret.
Australia.
Yeah. I mean, one of my really good friends, Mel Histon, runs a charity called Got Your Back Sister and the Sister Code, and they do amazing things for women and children, empowering them, then getting them back on their feet, helping them leave domestic violence relationships. Another really good friend of mine, Sandra Jarvie, and some other girls that we went to school with, they have Girl Friday where they raise a lot of money and they give to a lot of the refugees around here, women's refuges and stuff. So people are talking about it more and more and more, and there are more places for people to go now. And because it's an epidemic, it's a global epidemic of violence against women and children. And
Still, it
the
hasn't
more we,
changed. They keep putting all this extra funding into it, doing all this extra stuff. It still keeps happening. Women are most at danger in their own homes from
yeah,
people who are supposed to love them, and children.
yeah, but we all have to have some responsibility
Yeah.
for ourselves.
Mm.
That's where it starts. And even if it's just to tell someone what's happening
Yeah.
instead of keeping it a secret and pretending like everything's fine,
Yeah.
just to move past that shame and guilt that you got yourself into that situation in the first place. Because I know when I got myself into that kind of relationship, I just left working in maximum security prison, and I'm like, I thought I was one of the most assertive, strongest women that I met, that I'd known, but I was very passive aggressive rather than assertive, and I wasn't speaking up about how I felt about things. And then it did manage to get me into this relationship through trauma had got me there, and I was feeling so disconnected from me.
Trauma bonding.
Yeah, and so I got myself into a relationship with this psychopathic narcissist who ended up in jail. The shame was the most crippling for me.
Shame.
Like,
Yeah.
how
That's
can
the big thing,
such
isn't
a
it?
strong person who has all this shit together now be in this situation with this person? And the more people around me started saying, "What are you doing with him? What are you doing with him?" The more I'd be like, "Oh, I can fix him. He's different with me." Like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
love side of things would be so intense that I'd be like,
Yes.
"Oh, if he can feel this now, that if I can bring this out of him, I can bring this out of him all the time." And then that's when my rescuer would want to kick
Yes.
and
Yeah.
wanting to save him and then wanting to save myself. And it was like no accountability for what I was doing in that relationship.
Sounds like you've had quite the journey.
Yeah, I've had a weird life, but I feel like I'm just contracting it all, get it all out now, all that karma stuff, because I
Yeah.
don't want to do this human thing again. I'm pretty much done. I'm, I'm like, yeah, I don't like this 3D nonsense.
No, 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 no.
I still sometimes call this the skin suit. I'm like, wow, what is the skin suit again? Like, why?
So, I mean, something that a lot of channelers and people that work in our field experience is they lose friends and, get ostracized by family members. What's your experience of that?
Oh, absolutely. Even in 2016, when I decided I was going to do this business, I cut off like long-term relationships, friendships, and stuff. And I've cut out one complete different side of my family. And a lot of that's got to do with frequency. One, the more work you're doing on going within and connecting into self,
Yeah.
the higher your frequency gets. And so those people don't understand you anymore. They don't align with you anymore. They're not willing to shift, and that's okay.
Mm.
Just because people are family or people have been in your life for 20 years, it doesn't mean that they have to be around forever.
Yeah.
But we're like, oh, we must be doing something wrong. It's something wrong with us if we can't maintain these relationships. All it is we're growing and evolving, and people aren't going to grow and evolve with you. Then you just have to keep growing and evolving. The more space I cleared in terms of I don't speak to certain people now, the more availability of my friendships have completely changed. And with women that are like really wanting to make a difference in the world and are like really showing up for other people, and it's not just about them and their own little unit, and they're wanting to use their skill sets to improve the lives of everybody around them, and they're very much about manifesting and creating a better life for themselves and their family, and creating generational wealth for their kids to move on, and using that wealth then to nurture the world around them and to give and charities. And it's higher frequency stuff. It's much better to be like that. Like, let go of this. I always think about like a hot air balloon. You can be puffing all of that fire and all that frequency up into the balloon, but if you've still got bags and baggage and stuff attached to that basket, your balloon's just going to go sideways. You're not going to reach the heights that you want to. You have to look at what's hanging off your basket, and if it doesn't serve you anymore, let it go with love and let them go and do their own thing. And I have noticed the friendships that I have cut off, they've gone on to do amazing things, and I don't think that they would have if we were all sticking to each other out of a sense of loyalty because of the time that we had been friends, but we were growing and evolving. Same with relationships. I look back at my ex-husbands, I'm like, man, I'm such a different person now. If
Yes.
I had
Yeah.
stayed in that marriage, I wouldn't be as happy and as content and as fulfilled and showing up in my true authentic self if I was
Yeah.
still in that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just got to
You
let go of
continually keep transforming and growing and changing, which is another thing about channelers and people that work in the psychic field, is that some of them don't walk their talk. You know,
oh
they're giving
yeah.
advice and guidance to everybody else, and their own lives are a shit mess, and they haven't done any of the work on themselves. And that's another issue, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Then you've got the gurus that come out and say, I have special gifts and I'm so this and I'm so that. And I'm like, oh, stay away from those ones. Most of
And
us
I
are just
have
the
rushed
other
off and
way.
paid those people a lot of money for sessions and found out that they weren't as good as they said they were.
So have I. And then I'm like, why did I do this? Where's the lesson in this? And let go of the resentment of that thousands and thousands of dollars you just spent on that person. And most of the time it's to prove to us that we're on the right path, doing the
Yes.
right thing for
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't be led by a guru. Actually, I had the strangest conversation. I know this is like really weird, but Doreen Virtue.
Mhm.
So in 2016, when I was doing all that channeling, Doreen presented herself to me in spirit form. And I'm like, holy shit. And I'm Googling, did Doreen Virtue die? And I'm like, I rang my spiritual mentor. I'm like, do you think it's possible for someone who's still alive to come to you in spirit? And we were like talking about it.
Yes.
And it was really weird. And she was telling me all this stuff about, because I was obsessed with her oracle cards. And like, Hay House to me was Doreen Virtue growing up.
I did a Doreen Virtue 4-day course in Queensland in 2010.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I had a chance to meet her at her very last Angel Intuitive and was told then she's getting fired and you'll see why.
She's
And
getting
then,
fired.
yeah. And then I saw why. She was up on stage. It was like a completely different person. She was reading from the Bible. Like her husband was standing over to the side with a keyboard and a microphone. And anytime she veered into her teachings that we were used to, he'd like dun 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 dun, and it says in the Bible blah blah blah. And she got up mid sentence and just left the stage. And Radley Valentine came out. And then when I was speaking to people that had been at the 3-day event, because we came on the last day, they're like, she'd been doing that the whole time, just getting up, walking off mid-sentence. And then all that stuff started coming out where she denounced everything. And
Yeah, I
then,
can't bear to watch her now. That was what
yeah,
I did. I did her 4-day angel intuitive course in, I think it was 2009, 2010, something like that.
yeah.
She was
So
all right then.
she denounced everything. So then a little while ago, she came to me again in spirit. And I'm like, what is going on? And she says, listen, you need to start telling people there are no gurus. That's a walk-in. And I'm like, what? And this is a walk-in Doreen. But it like it was contracted that way. And I'm like, please explain to me why. Just because people need to realize that the work speaks for itself. It's not
Yes.
who it's coming from. And I had to have my physical form change so drastically that people would be like in an uproar and realize keep doing the work because it's the work, it's not the person. There are
Yes.
no gurus.
Yeah, well,
Like stop
how
calling
many gurus have been
people
accused
impediments,
of sexual
sexual
abuse?
assault. Yeah.
I went over to India in like 2007 and did the whole Sai Baba thing, went to the ashram and did the whole thing. And then he got accused. I went to Brazil and I did the John of God thing. Went over there, had a wonderful experience. It was all good.
Church.
Then he gets accused. I mean, it just goes on and on and on,
It's the
doesn't it?
church. It's like that form of narcissism and abuse. Like we'll gaslight you into thinking that we're men of God or that we're spiritual, that you're being enlightened or any of that. And it's just preying on people who are searching for connection
Yes.
because they're disconnected from self.
Yeah, but they want to give their power away to a being who they think embodies God, goddess, all that is,
Yeah.
instead of looking
Within.
inside and connecting through their own heart to all of that.
And I've noticed the only problem that I've had with clients throughout the years are the ones that straight away, I love you, you're amazing, you're this, you're that, and then there's a problem later because I'm human. I'm not like
Yeah,
I'm
we're
not
all human.
different. I'm not special. But in their head, oh, I have this amazing coach and she's this and she's that, and then all of a sudden something goes away and they don't like it. And one of my best friends, she's really successful in an online business and really well known. She always tells me, as much as you don't listen to the negative feedback, don't listen to the really positive stuff too, because that's their stuff. Don't let yourself get involved in the
Yeah,
good stuff
yeah,
as well as the bad stuff,
yeah.
because the ones that put you up on the pedestals will be the first ones to pull you
Knock
down.
you down.
Yeah. So I'm like, so I just tell everyone, no gurus. And so it was a very good conversation with Doreen in spirit, like that is not a guru.
Yes.
Everybody had to learn, or because all of the work she's done, everyone's like, burning her books and throwing out her oracle cards and ripping up their certificates. Like this means nothing now, and I'm like, it didn't really mean anything in the first place. You don't need a certificate to say that you can do the work.
Yeah,
Like, oh, this is all shit, and it's not shit. Her work's amazing. Her books are amazing. The oracle cards, you can still tune
they're
in.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's got
I
nothing
didn't throw mine out.
to do. She was channeling the stuff. It
Yes,
wasn't her stuff, it was channeled.
yes, yes.
We still
That's
have
right.
access to the channels.
Yeah.
All of us have access to the channels.
Beautiful conversation today. I've really enjoyed it. It's been absolutely lovely. There's so much good stuff here. We might have to do it again.
Oh, I love
How do you
talking about
feel
this stuff.
about maybe channeling some light language for us now?
I'm just gonna feel into. Okay, so I always tell people when you're hearing light language, you've got to hear it from your heart. You can't hear it from your ears and your ego because your ego is going to sit there and this is a good way to tell the difference between your soul and your ego. Your ego would be like, oh, she's talking in tongues. This is shit. This chick's crazy. Like, turn it off. This is weird. But your heart and your soul will start to get activated.
Yes.
And so I always get people to like put their hand over their heart and like tune in and like really picture your heart beating in your chest because it's your heart that pulls in the quantum field of consciousness. It's like beating in your chest. Just breathe into it. Manahia tamusnuria na manahilu tu. Mahucha mahma akina pa amawakiniki. Isnale ato namanya lea nia puha akna na tutu. Imagine na minu o apuakiniki manikiaka. Washni na ma le hea hia aku ni iki. Hia ho hashne na mni tushni no to wa ma ni kinaki aka. O na mai no hu o to o kanake. Es na na ma ahla o kini na la kida tuaki. Imas no ana ke na ma no tutush mu ukneki. En ale atu marahina ke shniato o ma wahunu to o na mahia ki aka. Ina wish na mantira kuanaki.
Oh, wow, that was beautiful.
So that
Thank
was all
you.
about there is no separation. We're all one. We all are beating the same heart. What beats your heart beats everybody else's heart, beats everything. The nucleus of your cells, the animals and the creatures and the sea life and the plants, everything is beating with the same source energy. And the more you connect in to that, the more you'll realize that you're not alone and that you're never alone and that you always have access to love and to always be love. And whenever you feel fear, just think about something or someone that you love that brings you joy and transmute that fear into love and catch yourself all the time. Don't give fear any energy.
Wow, that's really, really beautiful. So much more beautiful because yesterday I channeled a message from Goddess Mart. You are not alone. You are never alone. So that really ties in with that. How perfect.
Oh, well,
It's been
good.
a joy and a blessing. I'm so glad that we got to connect today.
Me
And
too.
yeah, really loved every minute of it. Thank you so
Me
much.
too. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Okay.